Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Reviving Vet Med. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing team debriefing. We're going to break down the different types of debriefing, from learning debriefings to wellness debriefings, when we have these, who should attend, and how we go about offering them. So there's lots of practical tips in this jam-packed episode, as well as some downloads for you. I will include links for those downloads in the show notes, so watch for those. Otherwise, please note that this episode was recorded using live video, so I have a moment in this episode of distraction. I got a message from someone on my phone that was urgent, so had to take a moment to tend to that, but otherwise it's pretty smooth sailing. And with that said, I'm really excited for you to hear this information, so let's get into the episode. This is the Reviving Vet Med podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Marie Hollowaychuk. And my mission is to improve the mental health and well-being of veterinary professionals around the world. So our objectives for today are to learn what a debriefing is and what the potential benefits are for you and your team. I also want to share with you how you can recognize what situations are appropriate for a team debriefing, to know when and how to hold a team debriefing, and who should attend. And then I'm also going to provide you with resources for performing a debriefing and providing additional supports to attendees should they need that. So if we look at the term debrief in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it will say to interrogate someone in order to obtain useful information or to carefully review upon completion. So there's different contexts in which debrief has been used. It used to be more heavily used in, combat situations where they were, debriefing prisoners or people who they needed to get information from, essentially. And then we started to use debriefs in more of the business sense, in terms of, a project is completed or event is completed, and let's debrief on how that went. Now, I definitely prefer the Cambridge Dictionary definition of debriefing, which says it's a meeting that takes place in order to get information about a particular piece of work that has been finished. For example, about what was done successfully and what was not. So especially in the context of emergency and critical care, when we talk about team debriefs or debriefs in the context of a case, especially a post-CPR, it's really helpful for us to look at the CPR has been done and what went well and what could we do differently so that next time is even more successful. So there are many different forms of debriefs, and much of the information, of course, comes from healthcare teams. We have a little bit of information coming out of the veterinary space now, all in the context of post-CPR debriefing, which is really wonderful to see. In the context of healthcare teams, a learning debrief is a process that allows individuals to discuss their performance, to identify errors or shortcomings, and to develop plans to improve. So to really look at what we can learn from these particular situations. Now, there's also so-called well-being debriefs for healthcare teams. These processes are a little bit different, so they allow individuals to process difficult or distressing situations, to increase their social support. So when we have these conversations as a team, we start to recognize, I'm not alone in this. I work with someone else who's going through a similar situation, or someone else has gone through this situation on my team, so I could reach out to them to talk to them about it because they would know the context, in which I'm referring to. That, of course, reduces isolation. It also normalizes emotional reactions. Very often in vet medicine, I find that we go home and we just, feel gross about our day. Things didn't go well. We can't quite put a name to it. We have all these emotions coming up. And then we start to think, is there something wrong with me? Like, am I not cut out for this job? Is it this job? Am I burnt out? What's happening? If we can have a well-being debrief and hear everybody else's emotional experiences, what they're going through, it normalizes it. It makes it okay to be not okay in the context of some of the things that happen to us at work. And then we can learn coping strategies from our colleagues. So somebody might say, yeah, you know what? I was so distraught after that case we had last week that I scheduled an appointment with my counselor, and that really helped me. Or I went on a long hike this weekend and it was just so healing to be in nature, or whatever it might be. But we start to learn what other people use to help cope with the difficult work that we do as medical or veterinary professionals. So, debriefing and culture, the two are closely tied together. You have to have an environment with a culture that fosters certain things in order to normalize debriefings, or even to plan and hold debriefings. So first and foremost, we need psychological safety. If we hold a debrief, which is encouraging teams to share and process and learn from each other, if we don't have psychological safety, and that people don't feel safe to speak up, to share, to admit mistakes, or to point out shortcomings, I don't think the conversation is going to go very far. It's probably going to be pretty quiet all around. So that sense of safety at work, that sense of, I feel comfortable to speak up, to share what I'm going through, to ask questions, to say when I've made a mistake, or to point out when someone else has maybe made a mistake. That's the psychological safety that we need in order to have a debrief. We also want it to be okay that these experiences are normalized, that people aren't shamed or blamed if something doesn't go well, or if somebody's feeling really distressed at work. I can remember, I don't want to reveal too much information about the context in which this happened, but at some point in my career, I was working in an environment where I had a couple of really difficult euthanasias, and I was tearful around these euthanasias. And, I happen to be an emotional person. Tears come pretty easily to me, especially when I'm exhausted, or feeling stressed. And the sort of murmurings from the higher ups in this hospital were, Marie's just so emotional, and, she needs to kind of keep her emotions together, pull herself together. And that's hard. That means that, that it's not okay for me to feel feelings at work. And then others might witness that or overhear that and think, gosh, I better, it must not be normal to show emotion. I better not, show any emotion. That's not okay. And then, of course, last but not least, we want to make sure that we have a culture that embraces and promotes help-seeking behavior. Many individuals who are coming into a debrief are not doing well in the context of what happened. They're going to need help. So we want to make sure that we have an environment at work that fosters that. Do people need a day off, a wellness day, a mental health day? Do they need to be able to block time off in the calendar, in the schedule, so that they can go to a mental health appointment? Do we want to make sure that we offer employee assistance programs within our practice? All those different types of things to just normalize it. Like, yeah, that was tough. We all need help. Maybe the practice even brings in a mental health professional, a social worker, or someone else to have a conversation with the whole team. Again, promoting, we want you to seek help. We want to offer help to you in the context of these tough situations. So there's many different outcomes that can come from debriefing. We can identify problems and solutions, especially if it's more of a learning form of a debriefing. We can build self-awareness. We learn about ourselves when we stop and take a moment to reflect on how we're feeling in the context of what's happening to us. We can identify self-care strategies. We can improve team communication and support. We can also identify symptoms of burnout and secondary post-traumatic stress. We can practice self-reflection. We can develop and nurture a supportive culture. And again, we can offer resources for support. So many great things that can come out of a debriefing. Now, I do want to highlight the fact that debriefings are not a catch-all thing. We don't just hold a debriefing and then, that's it. That's all the team needs. These are not a substitute for psychotherapy, for counseling support, for crisis intervention, or for post-traumatic stress disorder care. Remember that when we hold debriefings at work, most of us are doing it without the support and guidance of a mental health professional. So we are doing this as a team to support each other and to process, but we are not able to provide these mental health support services, which very often are needed for individuals who have gone through a distressing or difficult situation. So please do not look at these debriefings as, okay, we don't need to invest in EAP because we're just going to have debriefings. That's definitely not the case. So When do we hold a debriefing? When might it be needed? Well, when team members feel distressed, disturbed, confused, or unsettled in response to a situation, to me, that is an indicator that a team debriefing is warranted and could be offered. So what are some specific situations? So other than the sense that you have from your team, especially if you're in a management position and you have team members coming to you saying like, I'm just so confused after what happened, or they're coming to you with lots of questions. You're getting the same questions over and over. You're getting the same people coming into your office, feeling the same distress. That's certainly one way to go about it. You can expect that this might happen in certain situations, such as number one, unexpected in-hospital patient deaths. If you have a patient that was in the hospital, didn't come in off the street dying, although that can be distressing as well, but it was in the hospital, things were, going smoothly, and then suddenly that patient had an arrest or was found dead. Very distressing to the team. And often people confuse what happened, wanting to get sense around that and how do we move forward. A mistake that involves several team members. So usually if it's just a mistake involving one person, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that we have a whole meeting around that unless that person is very set on sharing their experience and, moving forward, as a team. But often individual mistakes one-on-one. However, if it's a mistake that was miscommunication after miscommunication after miscommunication, and then the way that it was handled was maybe not done well or could have been done better, that would be an indication for a team debrief. A euthanasia procedure that goes poorly. So this could be the conversation leading up to the euthanasia. This could be the euthanasia itself. Again, very often with euthanasia procedures, it's many team members involved, from the front reception team to the animal care team to the technicians and to the veterinarians. So all hands on deck might want to have a discussion about that. Certainly anything traumatic, like a break-in to the practice, or a situation where there's a change in practice ownership or management. Maybe we need to have a conversation about that, and not just a conversation that is, here's the plan moving forward, but a conversation in the context of, how's everyone doing in light of this news? What questions can we answer? What do we need to do going forward so that everyone, feels comfortable and on board with this situation? Again, very often the team debriefs, if we go back to those definitions that I shared earlier, it's about information gathering and it's also about processing. So you might want to gather information from your team and then help them with processing that together. Now, in the context of timing, this is a big thing that comes up in the healthcare space. When is the best time to have a debrief? And very often it depends on what the debrief is about. Again, is it more of a learning debrief or a wellness debrief? Most individuals will say that ideally we would hold a debrief within 24 to 72 hours of whatever the event was. And there's benefits to this. This is not so soon after the event that post-event tasks or urgent needs can't be tended to. After a CPR, when things have exploded in the hospital, people need to get back to, sorting out everything that was missed while that situation was unfolding. So that's probably not a good time. But if we wait until the next day or maybe later in the shift or whatever it might be, that might be a better time. The benefits, again, are that the event is still fresh. We can tend to the emotions that have come up, but people will still have a little bit of opportunity to process their emotions, and most of the involved people will still be able to attend. It's not like they will have gone on vacation or, be off shift or whatever it might be. Within hours of the inciting event, yes, this can be done. Some people might not be available because they're tending to other urgent needs. They might also not be emotionally ready. They might not have actually been able to process or reflect on what happened. And all the information might not be available. This is another big thing, is we want there to be, all of the case records completed and the client communications and gathering up all the things that we might need to really process what happened. And so that might not be possible that soon after the event. And then if we wait weeks, people often lose interest. It's like, that was weeks ago. I'm over it. Don't really want to rehash it. Or when it comes to rehashing it, they might not actually remember everything that happened. So again, sometimes we wait too long and then it's a little bit too much of an afterthought in those situations. So who participates in the team debriefing? First and foremost, I would say everybody is welcome. Anybody who wants to be there should be welcome to be there. These, again, if you are intending to have a conversation that needs to be confidential or whatever, those should be had not as a debriefing, but more of like one-on-one or small meetings. A team debriefing is really that. It's meant for the whole team to be involved. Whomever was impacted or even peripherally impacted, maybe they're good friends with someone who was directly impacted and they want to show up to understand and know how to give support. Everyone should be available to be there, especially those who were directly involved or impacted by what happened. Now, you may need to hold the team debriefing outside of hours. So this may need to be, kind of like a staff meeting that is outside of hours, or especially for 24/7 hospitals. I mean, let's be honest, it's always going. There's not really an outside of hours. Do we need to close the hospital temporarily, to facilitate having this conversation, especially if it's a smaller team? Or maybe in the context of a 24/7 hospital, do we need to bring in some locum coverage so that we can allow all of the team members, I should say, to attend? So again, thinking about creative ways, and there's different ways that you can hold the debriefing. You could certainly hold it in person in a private location. Again, not to say that others aren't invited to attend, but so that everyone just can feel comfortable to share. We don't want clients overhearing conversations like these. So somewhere that is separate from patient and client management, and where people can comfortably sit. We don't want everybody kind of standing up, like almost as if they want to leave at any minute, and preferably in a circle. All of the debriefs that I've been involved with have always been in a circle so that everyone can see every person. If we sit in a classroom style and we're all kind of facing the front, it's just not, it doesn't create that cohesive team support, we're all in this together sort of feel. There's the Knights Round Table was designed that way for a reason. You can also do a virtual debriefing, and I would encourage you, similar to everyone being in that circle, that everyone is encouraged to have their cameras on, unless they are not properly clothed or there's some specific reason why they really don't want their camera on. Seeing all those faces, seeing everybody's emotions and reactions, and that they're all really intently listening is really important for the participants. Now, we also want to have all case information available for reference or review if it is related to a case, or maybe it's a situation. We want to have updates, whatever it might be. And someone will need to be appointed the facilitator. So if we all kind of show up into a room and nobody's taking the lead, it's a little bit awkward, It's like who starts, who's leading, who's facilitating. In my perfect world, this would be a veterinary social worker. Now, I know veterinary social workers are few and far between, especially in regular practices at this point in time. Some of our very large specialty hospitals have access to a social worker within their network or part-time within their hospital. Most of us don't. There are social workers who will come in, on a consultant basis to perform debriefings. If that's not available, could it be the medical director? Could it be a team member? It could be a hospital manager, but there is some benefit to having someone facilitate who is part of the team. Sometimes when there's a little bit of a power dynamic in place where it's the practice owner or the hospital manager and then the team that was involved, there may not be as much safety in that. So if we can have someone who is a team member, boots on the ground, really has a very good, trusting, respected relationship with the team. Really, really important. And especially that they have a strong emotional intelligence or awareness. So you want someone who can demonstrate empathy, who has good listening skills, who doesn't need to be the talker, who is okay to hold back and let people speak their mind and then facilitate as needed. So this takes skill, it takes practice, and you might need to kind of rotate through a few members of the team to find, who kind of best fits. And it doesn't have to be the same person every time. I would urge you actually to, move the responsibility around, but just to give you a few thoughts on that. Now, when it comes to the steps for the team debriefing, number one, we have to set the stage for this. So we want to let everybody know that we're here to listen, that there is no judgment. Again, that creates that psychological safety. We have a desire to understand and move forward, understand what's happening, understand how we're feeling and move forward from that. There might be an intention to establish some sort of goal at the end, that we want to be stronger as a team, or we want to prevent this from happening again. I would make sure that when you're going into the debriefing, that the intention of the debriefing is very clearly stated. Otherwise, it can be very confusing. And, it can also, I will say, be a little bit, it could be damaging if we are holding a debrief that is really meant for information gathering, learning, etc., and people are showing up as if it's a well-being intervention, for emotional support and processing. They might not get out of it what they need. We want to make sure that for those who need those resources, that we can provide those, okay? This is not a substitute for mental health professional support. This has to be reiterated at the beginning. Even if you do have a social worker who is facilitating this, they are not there to provide one-on-one counseling support. That is not the point of a debrief, so that needs to be handled separately. So again, some verbiage that you might use. The purpose of this debriefing is for our learning, emotional processing, well-being, and ensuring quality of care. So this might be around a case that just did not go well in the hospital. You want to learn from it. You want to process things. You want to make sure that the team well-being is supported, and that moving forward, you're offering good quality of care. That is an ambitious statement. It's covering a lot, so you might only cover a few pieces in your team debrief, but I hope that gives you an example. So we want to then go into a description of what happened. So let's recap for everyone why we're here. What is it that happened, and what are we here to discuss? So you want to briefly review the events to make sure that everyone has a shared understanding of what happened. I would encourage perspectives from multiple individuals. You can start as a facilitator by saying, can someone please walk us through the situation? And then from there, you could say, Marie, what's your take on what happened? Or does anyone have something else to contribute that hasn't been mentioned so far? Then we want to welcome any sort of reaction. So allow participants to share their perspectives about what happened and how they felt, and encourage them to use sentences beginning with I. So I noticed during the CPR that nobody was recording, or, I felt that the CPR was very disorganized, or, I felt helpless when I was doing the euthanasia and I didn't have anyone to come help me move the body, or lots of different ways that we can express our reactions to the situation that happened, depending on what the situation was, of course. So as a facilitator, you might urge, encourage these responses by saying, how do you feel about what happened? And how are you feeling now? Right? So maybe people they had a lot of intense emotions in the moment, and now they're feeling, I've had some time to think about it, and, ... Then we have the analysis. So this is looking at the rationale behind what happened, using perspective taking and empathy. So let's say that we're debriefing a really difficult encounter with a client. Maybe a client just exploded at the front of the hospital. Multiple people were involved. Multiple people were addressing this client. It was a case that was, being managed by a few people. There was multiple things that led to the owner's anger. So perspective taking might be, I wonder if the owner was feeling really frustrated because he hadn't received an update in 24 hours. And empathy, I can imagine he must have been feeling really scared, not knowing what was happening with his dog, or whatever it might be. You might identify systems or issues that played a role. So was there a miscommunication? Is there a lack of protocol set up for a certain scenario? What all could have contributed to this happening? So probing questions from the facilitator could be, tell me more about that, or what do you think led to blah, blah, blah. And then we have the application. So this is where we take what we have learned and processed and heard and analyzed and determine what can we do differently next time if a similar situation arises. So creating a list of action items, if this is even applicable or necessary, it might not at all be. It might just be, what next steps are there here? So probing questions could be what could be done what could we do differently next time, or what needs to be done to ensure that XYZ happens? And then some sort of recap or summary at the end, recapping the main learning points, any action items. Again, here's where we make sure that there are resources available if further support is needed. If you see that your team members are feeling distressed, that you feel like there's more conversation to be had, but might be better on a one-to-one counseling scenario, you want to offer those resources. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So can we summarize the important takeaways, or what additional supports would be helpful? Maybe they want to have another debrief in a few weeks when there's more information. You want to kind of establish that with your team. And one thing that I love to do at the end of a debrief like this, if time permits, and I urge you to ensure that there is time for this, is to have at least a one-word check-in with every single team member who is present. Just one word. How are you feeling right now? Or what is one word that is coming to you in this moment? Not everybody is feelings person, so they often shy away from describing feelings. And so, you might get everything from confused, in which case that's good to know because maybe there's more debriefing to be done, or content, or grateful, all sorts of the range. But if you don't ask, you don't know. And very often you might have people attending the debrief who don't say a single word throughout it. They can certainly pass on the one word share, but that one word share might give you a big insight into what their experience has been. And as a facilitator, this is a really important sort of takeaway to know, like, where's the team at as we exit this debrief? And then you can always circle back with individuals who you feel may be distressed. So I have broken down the steps and conversation prompts in a handout that I welcome all of you to download. If you go to my website, mariehollowaychuk.com/debriefing, you will be redirected to another page where you will be asked to enter your name and email address so that you get signed up for my newsletter. And in return, you will get an email with this PDF debrief document. So I urge you to take advantage of that. Now, what about additional support? So when individuals experience extreme trauma or they're distressed, especially if they are having persistent symptoms in and outside of the workplace that can be very reminiscent of a post-trauma event, additional support is going to be needed. Remember, you haven't provided any mental health support. You've provided, a space for sharing and perspective taking and understanding and maybe some resources, but they likely need additional mental health support. So this might be a consult with a veterinary social worker to facilitate a team or individual debrief. This might be making sure that there is access to EAP or organizational mental health supports. This could be sharing information regarding online counseling, and this could be providing veterinary specific resources. For example, we have the Veterinary Mental Health Initiative. I'm just, distracted there for a minute. We have the Veterinary Mental Health Initiative, which is a website providing information and group counseling. Well, I shouldn't call it counseling. It's not counseling, but group support for veterinarians and vet techs, especially those who are do not have the resources to seek private counseling. Okay, so lots of things that we can do to provide additional support. So this is the website for the Veterinary Mental Health Initiative. If you Google the Shanty Project and Veterinary Mental Health Initiative, you will come to this website, and they will you will find information if this is something that you'd like to explore. I will put the information for this website in the show notes as well. And I have created as well a handout for Wellbeing. So I urge you to download this and share this with your teams. This is an electronic document that has clickable links. You can forward it to your team members so that they all have access to it. You could also post it in the break room or staff room so that individuals can, take a picture and maybe Google some of these resources on their own time. But it has mental health resources, organizational wellness resources, other mental health supports, and other wellness resources. So if you go to my website, mariehollowaychuk.com/wellbeing, then you can access this download as well by signing up to my newsletter. So please take advantage of that. So our key takeaways for today: debriefing can help veterinary teams to process difficult situations at work, thereby reducing distress. Debriefing is not a substitute for mental health support or secondary PTSD treatment. A debriefing is best held within 24 to 72 hours of the event, and a trusted and respected team member can facilitate the debriefing using the 6-step process that I've shared. I really urge you as well to provide additional well-being resources, including mental health support, so that the team can come away with additional supports for their mental health, should they need that as well. So that's it for this episode of Reviving Vet Med. I hope that you took away some tangible tools and practical pointers for doing a team debriefing within your workplace. If you're not in a position where you would organize this, maybe this is something that you could suggest to your hospital manager to consider in the future. I think it has lots of positive benefits for team well-being, and certainly the debriefs that I've been involved with have been incredibly beneficial for everyone who's been involved. So if you enjoyed this episode, please feel welcome to share it with a friend. And if you can take some time to subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating and review, I would really, really appreciate it. If you are interested in the resources I mentioned during today's episode, please check out the show notes, and you can find more episodes on my website, mariehollowaychuk.com/podcast. I'd like to thank my amazing assistant, Jamie, for producing this episode, and I'd also like to thank you for listening. If you have questions for me, or if you would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, please feel welcome to email me at info@mariehollowaychuk.com. I hope you'll tune in next time. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Bye now.